Hello, welcome to another edition of Embers of the Imperium Homebrew. Today we're going to be looking at how I have decided to make an Arborec character. And what we're looking at on the screen here is just an image from Board Game Geek where somebody has posted some of the Arborec images from 3rd edition, Twilight Imperium 3rd edition. And the reason I'm using this one, it's the only place I could think of where we have Dirzuga and Latani pictured side by side. So for player characters, at least I'm ruling it that you can only be a Dirzuga. And let me explain the difference in case you are not aware. So the Arborec is more of an ecosystem than an individual. And so basically most of the elements of this ecosystem are stuck on their home planet. And it communicates with each other using spores. So the atmosphere is full of spores, and anyone who lives on this planet, anyone who's part of the Arborec, has access to what's called the Symphony. And the Symphony is the means by which all of these separate organisms communicate with each other and therefore become part of one greater ecosystem. I guess you could think of each individual as a cell within a brain, perhaps, but they have their own autonomy as far as I know. But there's one type of native Arborec creature that can leave the planet because they're basically stuck there, and that's the Latani. So the Latani is kind of like a flash drive, I guess. They can leave the planet, learn information, and come back, and then through the Symphony, feed that information back into the Arborec. The only problem with the Latani, who generally serve as soldiers, they can't communicate with the other great races. So since they only communicate with these spores, they have no way of interacting, with the Federation of Soul or the X-Jar or anything like that. But what they've learned how to do is to plant a fungus inside, I think at the base of the brain, in corpses, and they seem to have the most luck with Letnev and human corpses. And so if you look at the picture of these two Dirzuga here, we have Dirzuga Mantasa and Dirzuga Ohao. And you can see that they're very humanoid in appearance. Dirzuga Mantasa looks like she has pointed ears that looks like a Letnev Arborec, essentially. And then this one looks maybe human. Dirzuga Ohao. So Dirzuga is the term that they use for a corpse that has been reanimated by this Arborec fungus that has been planted inside of it. And so this is kind of just some images. You can see that they're kind of obvious in the sense that they've started sprouting outside of their head and shoulder areas, right? And it looks like, I'm assuming, it gets longer and more obvious the older and older the creature gets. So I'm basing my player character creation on the use of Dirzuga, because at least then they can interact with the other characters and the other NPCs. Now, in terms of character portraits, instead of just using these, I use Hero Forge to create most of my character portraits. This is the best I've been able to come up with. This is a Letnev Arborec, and I've done my best. So I've got these like tight horns on the head and some kind of weird plant hat that I've just tried to color in to make it look like these could be vines and leaves or roots or something sprouting out of his head. It's the best I can do at this point. But it came out all right. I kind of made his eyes look a little more dead. I actually gave him bovine eyes in here. All right, so let's take a look at a character sheet. So what I'm doing, because the Arborec can be a variety of bodies, corpses, I'm using the root traits of the body they inhabit. I'm not going to be giving the racial traits for now, just for the sense of balance. I don't really know how this is going to work yet, but I'm just using the base characteristics for that faction. So in this case, we're using a Letnev, so we're using the stats that I'd used for the Letnev character. Another thing I'm doing with them is I'm giving them, normal soak, but I'm giving them a little bit lower thresholds for wounds and strain than some of the other factions. So I'm giving them 8+ brawn for wounds and 9+ willpower for strain. So this one's coming out to 10 of each. There's a reason for that. Number one, they're animating a corpse. It's probably not going to be quite as robust as the living body was. But there's another ability the Arborec has I'll get into, I guess, right now. So there's quite a few abilities that I've given them. Some are good, some are bad. Or maybe even kind of balanced neutral. So the first one I have here is Symphonic Integration is what I'm calling it. So that means that as long as the Dirzuga is in proximity to another Arborec, like a Latani or a Dirzuga, or the planet itself, they can communicate via spores, as long as they're close enough. Which means that they know what the other one knows, right? But they also know what you know, so you can't really keep secrets. Secrets cannot be kept between two Arborec because they know what the other one's thinking via the symphony. I'm giving them an ability called Flash of Memory. So the Arborec claim that they're using only the corpses of the dead, that they aren't really violating, they're not killing people. And they say, don't worry, we're not reanimating your friend. That friend is dead and gone. We're just reanimating their body and using it. But they do get flashes of memory. And as far as I can tell, this is something they kind of keep secret. Because we'll get to the next step. When we get to the next ability, I'll kind of explain a little more. But occasionally they'll get flashes of memory. So I've given them an ability called Flash of Memory. And what I'm doing is once per session, the host body, or the person who used to inhabit the body, will have a memory come up into the brain that will allow the Arborec to add a proficiency die to a roll. And notice I said add and not upgrade a die, because this could actually exceed their normal die limit. So you're just adding a yellow die to one roll once per session because of some experience that the host body had gained before they died. But this kind of leads to the next one, which is kind of a negative ability, Social Pariah. So the other races of the galaxy do not like the fact that the Arborec reanimate the corpses of their loved ones. So for some people, it might just be seen as disgusting that these are essentially walking corpses, and some people might find it morally offensive to use the dead this way. So if they're communicating with someone who knows that they're a Dirzuga, which is fairly obvious unless they keep it well hidden, you get 2 black dice on presence rolls dealing with dealing with others. 1 black die, if you're able to deceive them, you can reduce this to 1 black die, and the reason for that is just that I feel the Dirzuga will have some sort of unnatural movements and mannerisms, not having complete natural control over the body as the original host would have. So a little bit of Uncanny Valley. That's how I imagine these characters. In fact, I'm leading into that. In fact, I could have just called this Uncanny Valley. You know what? I'm going to do it right now. Social Pariah. I'm going to call that Uncanny Valley instead, because I think that sounds better. Uncanny Valley. All right. But it's more than that. It's not only the Uncanny Valley, it's plus the cultural disdain a lot of people have for what they do here. The last ability I have is, I think, a very interesting one. Is Fungal Transference. So on the death of the host body, another player or NPC could do a medical check with a difficulty depending on the corpse to remove that fungus from that corpse. And then the fungus would immediately start to die until it can be planted in a new host. I've kind of arbitrarily chosen an hour just to give some urgency to it, to plant it into a new corpse using another medicine check, and then the Arborec player would then have to roll a resilience check for the Arborec to successfully merge with the new host. So a little bit of a complication, but this means that whenever the Arborec player or character dies, they could be brought back in another body. Okay, and then you would just start with a new template with the new XP and have them. I'd probably keep the same proficiencies because those should be traveling with the memory of the Arborec, but then I'd probably just use the stats of the new body. So this might mean that you might be losing points, like your die limit would stay the same. So you might have one body that was, rank 4 in Brawl, but the new body's only got 2 Brawn, which means they're going to be still limited to 2 dice, right? So something to think about there. So you need to maybe optimize your body a little bit. All right, and then how I would do difficulty with this, I'm looking at Letnev and Human being the easiest, so probably do difficulty 2 medicine checks and resilience check. I'd probably reduce the resilience check by 1. So let's say a 2 medical check for a human Letnev and a 1 resilience difficulty for the resilience check. And then for like mammal type creatures, and that could be anything from a sar to a kakan to a cow, would be 3 difficulty. Getting into other like reptiles, amphibians, fish, looking at 4 difficulty. So you're looking at the hylar, the X-jaw, a lizard, or a nalu, a snake, essentially. And then 5 would be something maybe really bizarre physiology, like an Imperium. I would probably leave ghosts and Gashly out of it because they're kind of so far removed that you couldn't really merge with them. They don't have the right organic element in their body to keep the fungus alive. So kind of how I'm doing that. Again, it's all kind of pioneering and guess and check. If you have any insights on how this might work better, of course, let me know. And have a wonderful day.